Hello and welcome back to another episode of Transport Fever 2. We're here in Brookshire County just outside of Portland, and in this video we'll be setting up a new tools line in this side of the map so that we can start to supply some of the cities around the area and start to maybe move some resources across the map. And so looking at our area around Portland, we have this stretch of land here across the river where I think we have some pretty good potential to set up a tools line, as we have a forest here, we have a sawmill farther down the river this way, and then we have these two tools factories that we'll be able to use to supply tools to Salt Lake City as well as Houston. And so I think the way that we're going to do this is we're going to have a few forests set up over here, sort of where this river merges, and then we're going to send those logs by boat down to the sawmill, and then from the sawmill that will go to the tools factory right here, and then from there we will use a different boat line to send that out to Salt Lake City and Houston. And so the good thing about using one of these tools factories here is, even though Portland doesn't use tools, we can send a boat out to Salt Lake City and then a separate one out to Houston, and there is potential, although I'm not sure, I'll have to double check the boats, where we can bring fuel back from the Houston port all the way back over here so we can start supplying Portland with some fuel. And so really the whole goal of this episode is to really start developing these three cities, since in the last video we upgraded our train lines and those have been starting to work out very well for us, as you can see with our money. But I want to make sure that we're able to sustain that success as we push our cities larger and larger, since in some of these areas we are still running just under full on some of these trains. You can see this one's not quite full, and then this one leaving Salt Lake City, this one might not leave full. But the goal is to get these cities developing even further so that these train lines can continue to pump out money and financially support some of the other projects that we have across the map. And so let's hop right into this before we start losing money. We're going to first tackle this area and pretty much add a couple of forests here, and then we'll place down a port somewhere in this area. I want to have this a little bit more spread out, and then we'll have trucks come and deliver the forests to the port. So it'll operate a little bit differently than some of the other forests that we've done across the map, but I think it should still work out pretty well for us once it's all done and detailed. Alright, now I think we are finally done here with our forest area. We didn't focus too much on the individual forest industries. We more focused on the network as a whole and connecting to this port area. And I think this came out quite nicely. And if we ever want to come back to it, we can always come back to these forests and maybe expand these once production ramps up and there's more demand for tools across the map. But for the most part, I'm pretty happy with how this looks. And I think we can move on down the river to our sawmill here. So now moving on to the sawmill, we'll want to delete this and orient it how we want. So first we'll probably need to get one of these in here. And this can fit pretty easily right along the river, just like so. And then we'll want to flatten this so that everything is at the height that this port is at. And then once we're done with that, we can place down our industry. And we'll see how much we do with this. I do want to get to everything else, so we might go a little light on detailing the sawmill and the tools factory for now, but we will get them set up. So let's first get our street set up. Or actually, it seems like we can just place this down right across the road from our port. We'll just want to make sure it's centered. So we can do that. And I think that looks pretty good. We'll leave that as is. We'll just upgrade this road to be a dirt road to match with everything else that's going on. And then really I don't think there's too much that we'll do to this industry. We'll add some trees for context so it doesn't look so weird and out of place here. And then we might add some areas next to this for sort of logs and plank storage, but nothing too crazy at the moment here. Alright, and so this is going to be it for now for the sawmill. Again, it's just something very simple to get us started with, but we will come back in the future to expand upon this industry once demand and everything else is figured out. And so the last portion of this is the tools factory here. I think we're going to delete this one as we won't need it. I like the location of this one a little bit better, so we'll just delete this one as well and clear out a nice spot for us to rebuild it. And we have this nice little flat area, which is where that's going to go. So we'll place down a port, we'll place down the industry, we'll do a little bit of context there, and then once we're done with that, we should be able to start setting up our routes and getting things moving. Alright, and then I think this is good for our tools factory. Again, we didn't do too much, but this sets us up in a good area to expand further in the future. So I believe all we have left to do is just smooth out these edges in the terrain, and now we can get into setting up all of our lines across all three of these areas. And so let's get started here with our logs. We will want a road depot somewhere, so we'll grab this and hopefully we can just toss it onto the end of this road, and we shouldn't have much issue doing that. And so we have our road depot here. We will come down to our steam trucks. We'll start off with a low amount on each line, and then once we figure out demand and everything else, we can start to adjust that. But we'll set up a line just like that. And then we can set up our second one. And then lastly, we can have our third line come into here. Alright, and all of our trucks are now going out to their respective industries. Next, we'll need to get some boats going across all of this. And we'll just order those boats here from our food processing plant. It's not too far of a trip, but I think with the demand that we currently have running, we can probably use... It looks like we can use this Klondike boat. We'll get maybe 4 of those, and then these will come and pick up logs from here. So we'll set this to load logs. They'll come over to the sawmill where they will unload the logs and then load planks. And then lastly, they'll come over to the tools factory where they will unload all of the planks, and they'll leave empty to go back to the logs industry. Alright, so now we'll want to start thinking about delivering these tools to Salt Lake City and Houston. And I think that's going to be 2 separate lines. We'll have one that strictly goes to Salt Lake City, and then another that strictly goes to Houston. We'll see what happens. I'm almost tempted to build a train line to come out to Houston just because of the distance, but I think boats will still be fine. We'll just need a good amount of boats to keep the flow up, since Houston does demand about 128 tools at the moment. So that's a good amount of tools to have to keep up that rate, but we'll figure it out once we get going. But thankfully the new boats that we have here have a top speed of 19 miles an hour, which isn't too quick compared to some other vehicles we have, but for boats that's pretty fast. So getting those to go out all the way to Houston might not be so hard. And let's just start off very simple. We'll start out with 6 boats, and these will be the boats that go to Houston. So those will come to that area, and then they'll come in and drop off here where we drop off our fuel. And we want to make sure that this is all scheduled correctly, or else we could run into some issues of boats bringing different resources from around. We'll worry about bringing fuel back once the tools line is fully set up and running. But then lastly, we'll get 4 more boats, and those will supply Salt Lake City. So those will then come from here over to our Salt Lake City port. And then again, we'll set this up the same way as we did in Houston. Alright, so now while we have a whole ton of boats sort of figuring themselves out, while we wait for all that, let's start figuring out our line rates. So pretty much how we're going to do this is we have the 43 tools requested from Salt Lake City, and then the 128 requested from Houston, and we'll just round those up just for the sake of being on the safe side and as the cities grow. So we'll round up to about 150 for Houston and about 50 for Salt Lake City. So overall, we'll want this tools factory producing at a rate of 200. Now, because at this sawmill it cuts down our logs for 2 logs for 1 plank, we'll want to essentially bring in double the amount of logs. So that means our line rate for our boats bringing logs over should be around 400, and it's just over 400, which might actually be a little bit overkill. So we'll sell one of those boats, and 411 should be about the perfect balance there. We just need to let those spread out, and then we'll have to check our boats going to Houston and Salt Lake City respectively. So it looks like our Houston tool line is operating at a rate of 123, but we might let this wait until the boats are spread out a bit more, as the numbers might change. We can also just quickly come in here and add a few more docks, since the tools factory is going to be pretty large in terms of how much it's getting used. So we'll just need to flatten some of this out and then reconfigure all of this. Alright, now all of our lines should be able to use whatever landing is available. It's a bit of a mess right now, as we can see, because we did purchase a ton of boats all at the same time, but hopefully as those spread out and as our boats that are heading out to Houston and Salt Lake City get out there, things will start to spread out a bit more. And then the last thing we pretty much need to do with this line is make sure all of our trucks are bringing in logs at the appropriate rate. So all three of these lines need to end up adding to 400 for this to work out with our boats. And so just taking a quick look around here, it looks like we're pretty close. We'll have to come in here and actually add this up. So 125, 171, and 112. I do believe that gets us right around 400, but I think we'll want that to be just a little bit higher than 400 just in case. So I think we'll get 2 more vehicles on each line, and that should keep us above the rate that we need to maintain in order for our boats to do okay. And then also, while we're waiting, we will want to set up lines to deliver these tools into the cities. So for Salt Lake City, it looks like we can reuse this truck stop, and so we'll grab a new line with some of these covered tarpaulin trucks. We'll start out with 6. We'll see where that ends us up with, and this will pretty much run the same line as the food line, but we will keep the resources separate for now. And then we'll set up the same thing for Houston, and it looks like for Houston we'll have to use a completely separate stop to get all of the tools, and it looks like we could probably do it just by placing a stop here on that road, and then we'll just have to grab some trucks from here and pretty much do the same thing. We'll start out with 14 or maybe even 20 vehicles, since this line is pretty long and tools are the second most requested resource in Houston at the moment. So we'll do that, and then we can start to take a look at the rest of our line and make sure everything's functioning as it should. And so while we're waiting for our tools line to get fully up and running, I wanted to come back to this line that we put up in the last video, and I've seen some recommendations of changing out these cars, and I completely agree, as we have quite a few available that look much better than what we currently have. So we'll just take note of our current capacity of 154, and then we'll just delete all of these, and we can replace them with quite a few other options that we have here. We have some of these skeleton logging cars, some flat cars here. So I'm gonna look around and see sort of what the best combination is between all of these, as some of these vary in weight and top speed and capacity. And so I'm gonna build out the rest of our train with some of these cars, and then we'll be back once we figure out something that works for us. And so I think we'll go with this 32-foot skeleton logging car, as first of all, we can afford it. We actually get a slightly better power rating, as I assume the cars are probably a little lighter than what we're currently using. And we're at pretty much the same capacity. We do lose 1 log, but I don't think that should be much of an issue. But we can go and let that play, and we can see we actually have a variety of logs on our cars here. So I think that ends up looking quite nice. And it looks like the train also perfectly fits in the station, so that's another bonus. And so we will have to make sure that we still earn money on this line, because the cars might have a different running cost, but I think for the most part, we should be okay. We'll just come back and check on this at the end of the video. Alright, and so let's start taking a look at our boat lines coming to each city. It looks like Houston is at a rate of 179, and I personally think that's okay, as this number will grow once we start supplying those tools. So I'm pretty sure we'll probably end up around 150, 160. So being a little over that with our boats should be just fine. And then checking for Salt Lake City, this line looks like it's operating at a rate of 200, which is far above what we actually need when we said we probably want about 50. So I think I'll bring this down to 2 boats. I don't want to go less than 2 boats because the frequency will just be extremely low, but we will want to make sure that we're still earning money with this line. So even though the rate doesn't quite match up with what we want, I think the frequency will match a little bit of what we want. And then let's just double check the truck line that we have here. Yeah, this one's at a rate of 66, which is still far above what we want. I think 55, maybe even one less at 45 would probably be fine for this. And so we're finally getting tools coming out of our tools factory. I think we can start to accurately assess how each of our lines are starting to do. We do still have to wait for this tools factory to upgrade, so it's going to be quite a while before these boats make it to their destinations and we see this transport number go up. So unfortunately that's going to be the bottleneck for probably the next little bit, but once that upgrades, everything else should start to really open up. But let's take a look at our main boat loop and the finances there, and even with the slightly bottlenecked line rate due to the tools factory, it seems to be doing very well for us, earning us over $1 million per financial period, so that's very good to see with that. Unfortunately, we're not going to see anything for either of our cities yet, as no tools have been delivered for that. And then these truck lines, I think, for the most part, are going to be operating at very close to breaking even. That's just how it's going to be. A lot of that money will be made up with the boat line, but as long as these aren't turning into huge money sinks, there's not really an issue with them losing a few $1,000s per period. And so as we continue to wait for these tools to figure themselves out, let's just take a look at some areas across the map and make sure everything is functioning properly, our cities are growing how we want them to, and just make sure that nothing is going wild that we're not seeing at the moment. And so first things first, here in Portland, there's a lot of weird stuff going on with the roads, and I think we'll want to get ahead of that before it gets too crazy. So things like this road needs to go. We'll bring this down. This road should probably get straightened out so that it's not so awkward and we're not as pinched for space in some of these areas. So we're just going to quickly come through and fix some of that stuff. And then hopefully once we're done with that, we'll have a more structured Portland than what we currently have right now. Alright, and so while we did pretty much gut Portland of a lot of its buildings, it should rebound pretty quickly, and with a much better structured road network, hopefully that will allow it to grow much quicker farther in the future as the city continues to grow. And then taking a look at some other areas, it appears our food processing plant is doing very well. It looks like Salt Lake City might need some more food than what it's currently getting. So it needs about 161, and our boats are only able to provide about 130. Let's just make sure that our truck stop covers everything first. And it looks like it's able to do that. So I think this is just simply a matter of duplicating and getting a third vehicle on this line. That brings us up to 191. We'll want to make sure our truck line rate is just fine. 190 is perfect for that. So now we should start to see this start to empty out a bit more, and we won't be limiting our Portland food shipments, as those might be getting limited when this gets too full. We could also start to think about maybe adding a second dock here so that they're both not relying on everything being gone in order for them to have food. So we might switch Salt Lake City to this terminal and Portland to this one, just so there's always food for one of the lines regardless of where it's going. So I think that's a pretty good upgrade for this area, and we can leave this for now. And so let's check up on some other cities and lines. First we have Tacoma here. The city seems to be doing pretty well. It's been a little stagnant on growth recently, but I think what we can do is we can quickly expand the road network here, make sure everything is fine there, and then we can maybe bring in some more construction materials just so we can make sure that the city is still receiving the resources it needs in order to grow. Alright, so Tacoma now has a little bit more room to grow here. Let's just make sure now we are keeping up with the construction materials. So we need to be bringing those in at a rate of 151. And our train is only operating at a rate of 106. And then our horses are only bringing in at a rate of 130. So first of all, I think it's time we get rid of these horses, as we now have much better trucks throughout here. So we'll replace those, see where we get with our rate. 156 seems just perfect for where we're at. And then because this is just a single track line, I think we'll just modify this train so that it can bring more in, and we'll replace it because it has been a while and we have a slightly older engine running on it. And so let's try out this train. It is the 10-wheeler engine here with, I believe it's 11 of the 6-axle, triple-axle flat cars here. It has a top speed of 50 miles an hour, and the power rating seems to be okay. We'll have to replace this first and then see what happens, which hopefully we should get the money for that pretty soon. So we can just go ahead and replace that now. And it looks like that did bring up our rate initially, but we still need to get that up to about 150. So we might add a few cars. First, we'll just make sure that the train isn't struggling anywhere along this route. But once we do that and we build up some more money, we'll just add a few cars and we should be okay. Alright, so it looks like we're able to get this line rate up to 180, so maybe we get rid of one car. It's a little bit of fine-tuning, but I think 167 will be a good balance. We'll leave that there. And then as for this line, we will first want to replace these to the steam trucks. That brings us up to 128. And then we'll duplicate those until we get up to 155. Seems pretty good. And then lastly, we'll just want to make sure that our truck stop is still covering all of the construction materials, and it looks like it is, minus a few small buildings. So I don't think we're at the point where we want to split that just yet, but we should be doing much better on this construction materials line in the Tacoma now. And so moving on to another city just down the river is Lincoln. Obviously Lincoln needs a few more tools, but I think that'd be a little complicated to ramp that up at the moment, so we'll leave that for now. However, the city seems to be growing just fine. Nothing really sticks out to me. The only thing I might change is this road here, as much as that's going to cost us a ton. It looks like it automatically replaced that road with a much better connection, so I'm happy with that. There's not really much else we need to do here. The only other thing I wanted to maybe try out was getting another train running on this line. As we stated before, I think getting a second train on here will help with consistency and earn us a bit more money as these cities continue growing. So I think we're going to let this train go a bit longer, and then we'll duplicate it so that they're evenly spread out across the line. But it should just be as simple as duplicating this, and hopefully we won't run out of passengers at each end. But we'll keep a close eye on that as well as we continue to go on. And then moving on, everything here with our tools and logs looks pretty good. Let's take a look and see how everything is working out with our new lines that we put in the last video. This line's been earning us money pretty consistently. And then our new train here, it looks like the new flat cars didn't really help out too much, although we probably could deliver a few more since these cars are lighter, but we're still making money overall with this train. I just think maybe if we add 3 or 4 more cars, we'll earn a lot more, but we won't worry about that until we fully ramp up production elsewhere along the line. And our planks and tools line is doing just fine as always. Checking up on Roswell over here, there's a lot that needs to be done to make this city a little neater. Unfortunately, we don't really have the money at the moment to do that, but that will be on our list of things that we should probably do soon. Things like this isn't too good. Area roads in here could be resolved better, but I think Roswell's doing just fine for what it is. It is probably our smallest city on the map at the moment, if not one of the smallest, but we will get to developing it further soon. We just wanted to get things set up out by Houston and Portland before we start working on things over here. And then development in Pittsburgh seems to be doing very well. We finally see some buildings popping up over here. All these seem to be commercial buildings, but that's fine. Looks like we have another commercial building popping up over here. So all this is starting to fill out nicely. The city is continuing to grow up the side of the river here with all the residential buildings. We might want to get another bridge in here, maybe right here, to allow the residential areas to grow across the river as well. But I think for now the city is good. We have our industrial buildings. We'll probably want to build out this area soon to allow for all the industrial development coming in. But again, we'll save that for later on. However, one thing we could probably upgrade is our trucks bringing food into Pittsburgh. So we can just simply do that quick, and that'll raise it. We're not going to worry about getting it perfect right now, but it's pretty clear that we could bring in some more food as needed. Allentown is looking quite nice, and it seems to be filling in all of the empty spaces we left in the last video after we expanded the grid. The train seems to be doing a little bit better, and growth in the city is starting to ramp up as machines are being delivered. So I think Allentown's good to leave for now. I think this boat is doing much better, as well as this line, our construction materials line here. Let's just see how this is doing overall financially. This one's probably one of our most efficient lines on the map in terms of trucks. It's almost making us twice as much as it costs, so this is a very good line to have. And then lastly, before we wrap things up, it seems like our steel line is, or our machines line is doing pretty good. We're producing about 100 machines. Things over at our steel mill are looking good. These trains, they aren't they are kind of earning us money, but they're more or less breaking even. But I don't have too much of an issue with them because they are supplying a larger network. And obviously once we get better trains, it won't be much of an issue, but I'm pretty happy with how things are turning out on this side of the map. And so let's finally take a look at all of our lines as a whole and just see how things are doing now with everything upgraded. It looks like our construction materials train in Tacoma is our best line so far, which I wasn't expecting this, but we can see here occasionally it seems like it's able to make 2 trips in one period, and that earns us a ton of money, as that's probably about 3 to 4 million extra just in that one period. But other than that, our trains, our passenger train seems to be doing very well. Our farms and our new log boat line is actually doing probably the best consistently. We can take a look at that graph here. And then taking a look on the other end, it looks like some of our passenger trains might be starting to lose us money. Again, the whole purpose of building this tools line was to be able to fuel our main Houston, Salt Lake City, Portland train, which it seems like on average we're still making money from, but you do see some areas where it dips. So I'm not too sure what to make of that. And the rest of it just seems to be other lines that aren't quite as consistent yet, such as our Houston tools line. We can see it very obviously is probably making us money, but it's just very inconsistent at the moment as the boats are all bunched up on their line. You can see we really don't have any boats delivering tools to Houston at the moment. They're all sort of on this end of the line. So as time goes on, they will spread out and we'll be a little bit more consistent with our money on that. But other than that, I think we're doing very well. We can take a look at everything else with our finances. Our boats are really what's carrying us, or more recently, it seems like our trains are carrying us financially. Our trucks are actually earning us some money. A while ago, we were losing a bit of money. I'm not sure what this other is. It looks like just maintenance infrastructure. Our investments, I believe that's purchasing vehicles and other things, so that stuff you can pretty much ignore. But we can see here just this period alone we're almost up 7 million, so I think we can finally repay a huge chunk of this loan. We'll take it down to 5 million, and then once we build up some more money we can probably finish paying that off. And then I know we said that we're going to try to get fuel delivered to Portland in this video, but I think we're going to put that on hold since Salt Lake City now also requests fuel. So we'll probably save that for the next video. But first, let's take a look at everything we've done in this video, all the new things we've made and all the upgrades we've done. And then when we come back, we'll talk about future projects and pretty much what's going to come next. And so now that we're back, we can talk about what's going to come next in terms of our projects and maybe things that we're thinking about planning in the far future. So obviously, I want to revamp our fuel line, so we'll probably get this second oil well up and running. All of these industries we will come through and probably upgrade, and then we'll want to start delivering fuel to Salt Lake City and Portland, and I think we have an opportunity to do that with our tools line that heads out to Houston. As long as the boat can carry tools and fuel, this shouldn't be an issue, but I think later on those boats get split, so we might have to figure out something farther down the line, maybe a train or something else along those lines. But I think getting that fuel line upgraded and revamped will be priority number one, just because these cities all demand it, and it's realistically probably the next best option for us to do. And then I think another thing that we're going to need to do pretty soon is revamp this tools and planks line heading out to Roswell. It's been a long time since we've upgraded anything on this line. The last thing we did was add more trains, really. So I think getting this sort of revamped and getting Roswell set up for a better future is definitely up there. We have a ton of industries sort of out in the middle of nowhere in this area that we could probably get something heading to Roswell. Although it is difficult since it requires machines and goods as its other two resources, so it's going to be a little hard to provide that. I'm not quite sure we're ready to do goods just yet since we did just do machines, but maybe we can do something with this machines factory. Maybe a train we might be able to get to come all the way out to Roswell to deliver machines, but that's something we'll toy about with in the much farther future once we're more financially stable and we can start to take risks like that. And then I think the next thing, sort of after we do all of that, is start connecting the dots with our passenger networks. We sort of have this Allentown to Portland connection we've been tossing around for a while. We could probably get a line from Pittsburgh to Roswell, and then maybe another line from Pittsburgh to Lincoln. We can connect up to this line out here. And then probably the most likely one that'll come next for passenger connections is Tacoma to Houston. We'll just have to spend a lot of money to get through all of this really rough terrain, but I think having that connection will be pretty vital in getting people moved around across the map. But I think that's probably our next sort of overarching large goal here, now that all of our cities are growing at a pretty good rate. All of them are built out pretty well. Of course, we'll continue to do that as episodes continue to go on. Obviously, Houston could probably be filled in more here and out here, and then we can start to think about across the river. But that's just going to be an ongoing project. And then I think once we finally get a goods line set up, we can start to think about doing mixed cargo trains and getting a larger cargo hub on the map, so that we can start to distribute these resources a little bit more evenly across the map. Now, because we're going with much larger but fewer cities, it might be a little bit harder to supply a single cargo hub, so we might end up with two. So we'll probably end up with one that serves Houston, Salt Lake City, and Portland, and maybe even Allentown, depending on where we end up locating it. And then another one for the other side of the map, so one for Roswell, Lincoln, Tacoma, and Pittsburgh. But that's something that we'll have to figure out far off in the future, and once we are confident in our ability to make enough of those resources to supply the map. But again, that's just another thing that we'll keep in the back of our mind for quite a while as we start to think about these things. And so it actually just seems like we're earning a ton of money at this point, so right before we end off the episode here, we'll just finish paying off this loan so that we can finally be done with that, and we no longer have to worry about it. And now we have some extra money if we ever need to dip in for some of our larger projects. We can still take out some of that loan, but I'm pretty happy with how we've ended up at the end of this video, and I think this sets us up for a very bright future going on. And so with that, that's going to be all for this video. So if you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe. If you have any suggestions or feedback, leave a comment below. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.